What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Create the Courage podcast. This is a show where we delve into the art of chasing your dreams, leveling up your skills, and most importantly, taking charge of your life. I believe that nobody is coming to save you. It's up to you to create the courage to step up, take control, and shape your destiny. Now, this is a journey that I'm also on. So each episode, I'm talking to people from all walks of life, from all over the world, in the hopes to learn how they create the courage in their own lives. And today, my guest is a man who has always marched to the beat of his own drum ever since the first day I met him. He runs his own business as a personal trainer, helping people get healthy, all the while pursuing a passion for Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, where he recently has just won top spot in the Battleground Grappling Competition here in Perth, Western Australia, which is a testament to his dedication and commitment to discipline. I thank him for taking the time to come and speak with me and share his story. So without further ado, here's my chat with Joseph Turner, a man who definitely represents someone who creates the courage. Awesome. Joe, welcome to the Create the Courage podcast. Thank you so much for being here, brother, and making the time to come on today. I know you're a busy man and you're in between clients and everything. So thank you so much for coming in, mate. How are you today?
I'm doing fantastic, man. I just want to start by saying I'm really proud of you. For those who are listening, I've known John for a long time ago, from, 5, 6 years now.
Maybe 5 or
And
6 years going now, yeah.
yeah, he used to be my boss back when we were UFC gym, and now he's obviously moved on. We've all moved on to much better things. But it's nice because things have gone full circle. When I knew you, man,
Yeah.
you were talking about for a while that you wanted to do a podcast on your own, and yeah, it's good. It's good.
I appreciate it. I finally got the courage to do it. Finally, after 6 years of farting about doing it, I finally did it. So it's good. And I'm glad to have you on here because I know you were doing a podcast there. And I know you've been doing a podcast. You've done a lot of podcasts in your time. So you know a bit about what the hustle's like trying to get a podcast made.
It is. I tell people it's getting people on and filming it is easy, and talking is like a skill that you develop along with everything else. But the hardest part was always everything that came surrounding in terms of like marketing it and posting it and editing it and then promoting it, and then
Yep.
it's not just 1 hour conversation. It's like 12 hours at least for an episode. So
It is really, it actually is. I've been learning that the last 9, 10 weeks of trying to do one episode a week. I'm like, once it's finished, it's only just beginning of the editing and then the promoting it on all the social platforms and cutting up clips and doing all that jazz. There's a lot to it, but I actually love it. I actually really do love it. Even though I hate listening to myself. I don't know if you were ever like that, but I hate listening to myself. So that's a tough part that I need to overcome. I love doing it, but then listening back, I don't like myself so much when I'm listening back. I'm too critical of what I've said or didn't say or how I pronounce things or whatever. Did you ever get that when you were doing them or when you do them?
always. But yeah, when I
Yeah.
first started, you're not very self-conscious of how much we stutter or we say ums. Your sentencing can be slow, or it can be sometimes be too quick, or your tone. These all things that you're not really self-aware of because we do it on a regular basis, talking. But when you're actually talking on a podcast, you become self-aware of what you're saying and when you're listening to it. When I did it, I really didn't start listening back until I think it was episode like 100. And then I would go back and take notes. Yeah, because I think because usually with my podcast, it started out with me and my best friend. And then it was something we did for fun every week. It wasn't like we wanted much out of it. But then I started really, and then he went on to doing his master's degree, and he told me, hey, I can't commit to this anymore, but I was still enjoying it. So I went solo. For a while, and I did about another 67 episodes on my own. It was one-on-ones with people in the studio. And the main thing I tell people when it comes to podcasting is you really, really have to be curious, and you really, really just have to put yourself out there. But also at the same time, you do also have to have a genuine interest for the person you're talking to. Sometimes when we put
Definitely.
content out there for the sake of putting content out there, it can be a bit shit. But when I tell people the biggest piece of advice when it comes to podcasts that we have guests on, make sure you actually really genuinely want to talk to this person. That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
I think that's definitely wise words. You got to be interested, otherwise like when you hear podcasts and it just one person can't talk well and it just sounds like a slog, like an effort to get a conversation going. That's definitely what I don't want. And the cool thing about running your own podcast is you can select who you want to talk to. So that's something that makes it a hell of a lot easier because I'm like, I want to talk to Joe, and I'll tell you right now, when I knew I wanted to talk to you was when I saw, because I follow you on Instagram, obviously, and we've known each other since working together. Um, when I saw you win the BJJ competition, and this I want to get into this, but I just want to let people know what prompted me to want to talk to you because I feel like I saw you beginning to get into jiu-jitsu when we worked in the gym, and I'm like, you just started doing it as part of your training. I had no idea then that you had worked this hard to get to this point to go and win competitions. And I was just like, holy crap, that's epic. What a story. There's a story there. I need to find out what that story is because I was there when you first started getting into it, which now that you say 5 or 6 years, I was thinking like 4 years before, but I'm like, hang on, I was at UFC for 4 years and I've been gone for like 3 years.
Yeah.
And you came in, and so
Yeah.
like, hang on, it has been that long. But like, yeah, so you won this competition. If you don't mind, can you let the people listening know, what you do actually as a career and what the competition was, and then we'll get into how you prepared for it and got there, I guess.
Yeah. It's just my philosophy for life is if you're going to try, go all the way. And that came from my favorite author, Charles Bukowski, and it's the main philosophy I live by. And the reason by that is if I'm going to do something, there has to be not for the sake of just doing it, but for the sake of to getting somewhere to it. And that's one thing when I started BJJ, because I understood that this is a gigantic mountain to climb. And, there's things like, there's always something else like World Championships or ADCC. Obviously, the idea I go into everything is just the one question of how far can I take it? And I stop doing things when I believe that's it, as truly as far as I believe I can take it. And it was like that with the podcast because when I was filming the episodes, it turned into a bit of a chore, and I just said to myself, do I want this to be my career? Do I want to be doing this in another 5 years from now? And if the answer is no, then I say stop right now. And the reason why I take it so far is because I'm only 26. I came into the sport when I was 21, but guys in my sport compete well into their like 60s or 50s, and then there's always going to be another mountain to climb. And I really like that idea because I will never probably in this life really make it to the very end, but the goal is to see how far we can go.
That's so cool. And that's what's so good about jiu-jitsu and what I learned about, and I never did jiu-jitsu, but watching people do jiu-jitsu, watching people talk about jiu-jitsu, it's like a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle, essentially. It's something that you're going to do for your whole life, and that's something that you're constantly learning, right? You're always learning new things. Now, you started 5 years ago doing jiu-jitsu? Was 5 years
Yeah,
ago? 20,
yeah.
21?
Yeah. 20 when I was 21. It was a pretty interesting story because it's. I kind of like to tell people the story how I got into it. It
Please.
was actually because of a girl. So it was. I think it was. It was like this. I think I was. Yeah, I think I was about 21 at the time, and we were working in UFC, and I think I just got a massive tax check back. And what I did was I bought my girlfriend at the time, just before she broke up with me, a necklace. And it had a name on it and all that. And then I think it was 2 days before I was going to give it to her, she ended up breaking up with me. Then I took that necklace and then I returned it. And then they said, well, because this is a custom necklace, we cannot give you your full money back. But I told them the story. And then they were like, okay, well, we'll at least give you half your money back. I think it was something like that. Because I think they pitied me and they said they don't issue refunds, but the story was enough. And then I had that
Well
money
done.
on my hands, and then I was like, "Fuck, okay, well, what do I do with this money now? I have to invest it in myself." But I remember I was angry at the time, and then I was driving back to UFC, and then I remember I had to stop off in Malaga, and I specifically had to go to the MMA store because I needed to buy some pads because I was holding pads for people back in the UFC. And then they were doing a discount on BJJ, spats, and rash guards. And I did the math, and I said if I could buy myself 2 sets of rash guards and one BJJ gi, it would come to the total of what I got back on the necklace. I was like, okay, so let's give it a go. and then,
Wow.
and then immediately 2 days later, I started training. And it was just a classic case of sometimes when bad things happen to you, it's the best opportunity for something great to happen to you in return. You know what I mean?
That's so true, mate. Wow, that is like one of those classic stories of turning a negative into a positive. If that didn't happen, do you think you might have even got into it? I mean, obviously, maybe BJJ was on your mind a little bit. Like, have you done
It
it many
was. It
times
was.
before that, or a little bit on there? Yeah. Okay.
Not really, because I did karate a lot when I was a kid.
Hmm.
I did a tiny bit of judo because my dad was a judo black belt, but I never really had the availability to get into it because one, judo is not that popular. And at the time I was going through high school and I was going through university. And then when I was working at UFC, I was like, no, I mean, I'm here all the time. I may as well pick this up and start learning it because
Mm,
it was right there. It just had to.
mm.
Some people needed to shove. I just needed the girl to break up with me to start it. That's all.
Well, you can thank her now because look what you're doing with it, mate. Like, so what belt are you now? Are you purple belt now? Is that what you're up to?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that takes quite a while to get to, doesn't it? Like that takes a few years, I would imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. So on average, unless you're like a prodigy or you've done it since you were a child, the average time in between belts is typically 10 years. And
Yeah.
that's why a black belt usually takes 10 years. You can get it in less if you're someone who trains a lot and competes a
Mm.
lot, or you came from another sport, but typically 10 years. And the reason why is because it goes back to the classic phrase when it comes to mastering skills, which will take, either 10 years or 10,000 hours, I think it was. Something like
Yeah.
that.
I've heard that. I've heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like become if you listen, if you read a certain amount of books or do something for a certain amount of hours, it makes you in the 1% in the world of that thing or whatever. So that makes sense. I like that about martial arts too, though. I like that you've got to earn it. You can't just go quickly to get there. So the fact that you're already at purple belt now, that brings me to how often do you actually get to train BJJ? Because I know you're busy with your current work as a personal trainer and all the other things that you do. Like, how often do you actually train now for BJJ?
6 days. Usually I do, typically what's changed now is when I was getting ready for Battleground, I was doing, I think, 5, maybe 6 BJJ sessions a week and 2 wrestling sessions a week.
Damn.
And yeah, and now because what's happened to me is schedule's sort of changing a little bit. I'm in the process of moving houses. I'm only just doing about 4 or 5 times a week.
Hmm.
The reason it doesn't, it's, I do believe it's something you really have to do, not every day, but most days,
Mm.
because it's not, it's a sport that's changing. It's a sport that's always evolving, and it's also a sport that's always going to have competitors in it. And I think it's just the pure discipline of doing something nearly every day is how
Yeah.
you get better at it, regardless. Yeah.
Yeah. So nearly every day, and you work that around obviously because you still do weightlifting and you still do a lot of like normal fitness training too, right? So you're doing
Yeah.
that on top of doing your rolling, which if
Yeah.
anybody goes and follows your Instagram, which I'll chuck in the description of this video on Spotify and YouTube, you can go follow Joe on Instagram. And you can see because you post a lot of motivational videos on there, well edited and well made videos too. By the way, as someone who's getting into
Yeah.
videography and trying to actually learn how to do footage in the gym, who's the person that does your videos? Is it you, or do you
So
have someone come and?
yes, that's correct. So I have, when it comes to most of my videos, just say out there, most of
Mm,
them are done by my friends who I happily pay for. because I'd rather have someone pay to do that, and they're great at it. So the first one, I got to give these a couple of shout outs. One of my closest friends, her name is Mariah. She runs her own little social media company called Melina Creative. I've known her for years. She's absolutely fantastic. And then the second one is actually my former boss back when I worked at another gym. Her name's Jordana, and her company is called Energy Film. I hope I said that correctly. Yeah. And
Nice.
I just get them. I can come in. I paid them whatever they want. They give me like an hour's footage. They give me a few reels and some photos, and then I just post those reels. Sometimes I use the raw footage to make my own videos, but it's sort of following their formula. So that way I like to, because the thing is, I just believe I like to make things as simple as possible. That's the best way I can put it.
Yeah, I like the black and white that you use on a lot of your videos. I think that I like black and white. I quite like that. I think that works really well. And the cuts are really good. As someone who's learning to do the cuts and all that, I'm looking at those things and I'm like, oh, the editing looks like really on point. And then when you combine it with the audio, I'm just geeking out about that stuff at the minute and learning all about that.
Well, what I tell is, if you really, really want to get good at posting content, I just say post content you enjoy. Just post the things you really enjoy making. Like, you love making your hot toys videos, and you're passionate about it. Because you're so passionate about it, you don't worry too much about the editing process of it. If you're editing something you don't really care much about, then there's no point.
It's definitely more difficult to do something you're not passionate about. Luckily, I like health and fitness, so I'm like, okay, that's okay. I wouldn't mind doing that. But if it's like my own stuff, I have no problem whatsoever. I'll just like put it out, just churn it out, like churn and burn. But when I always think like if you're getting paid to do it, you better. I think that's where I go into like overthink mode. Like you got to make it good because they're paying for it, and you got to make sure that you, at least meet a level of their expectations. But when it's your own stuff, go for it. I say just start posting, stop waiting to anybody who's thinking about posting content. For sure, you're right. Now, I want to ask you about this competition. So this was at Battlegrounds. Can you tell me about this competition? You did the Battlegrounds BJJ competition. What is that exactly? Because I don't understand all the competitions that are going around.
That's okay. So in my sport of Jiu Jitsu, we typically do have like regular competitions, and we have state competitions and national competitions, recognized competitions. What Battleground Invitation is, it's more of a Jiu-Jitsu based fight card where it's just one-on-one matches. It's not up against other people. It's just one-on-one matches. It's predetermined, and it's time-based and submission only. If there's no submission, then it goes to a decision at the end of it. I did do a battleground event. I can't remember which number it was, a couple years back on my debut, and I lost. And then after then, I did a year of just non-stop competing. And then I went up a belt, and then I felt like I was ready enough to go back on. And then I was it was perfect timing because I got my purple belt last year in December. And I put my application in January, and then I got it by the end of January. I had a total of 6 weeks. I had a total of, I think, just over 6 weeks to get ready, which was more than enough. Just getting ready for this one, I was really happy because sometimes it's like this. When I did the first Battleground, I was in a position where my life was incredibly chaotic. I had just left UFC. I went to a new gym. The gym wasn't going very well. I had to go mobile. My ex at the time another ex had just broken up with me. I was moving back in with my mom, and I was moving in with my dad. And it came to a point where I was like, I couldn't focus. I was using BJJ as an escape. This time it was different. Before I got assigned a contract, I had to write down everything that went wrong last time. I was like, okay, I didn't have enough money, so save some money. I didn't work enough on my wrestling, so I joined a wrestling gym. I didn't give myself enough time to recover, so I had to make sure I forced myself to take 1 day off a week. It was just all these things that went wrong the last time. It was a deep analysis. And then when I did that and I signed a contract, I had a plan of how I was going to train. And then I was just really, really not so narrowly focused on this plan. I had to block out other things because as much as I love BJJ and do what I'm doing, I do a lot of other pursuits, and I get distracted very easily because I never put my eggs in one basket. I like to have multiple things I'm doing. I had to block out all these other distractions. Like I had to reduce the amount of workload. I didn't go out at all. I shut down all these other projects. I put all these other projects on hold. I had to make sure I severely cut back on my bills. It was like, okay, what can I sacrifice? Because in order for something to grow, something must be sacrificed.
Definitely.
So if I wanted to get better at this, something must suffer as a result. And there were all these other things that I took from so I could get better at it.
Yeah.
And then getting ready for the 6 weeks, I walked in this time believing that it doesn't matter now what happens, win or lose on the night. Even though I won, I tell people the best thing I did was that 6 weeks leading up to it, because it was the 6 weeks of me just being as focused as I can. In life, you're going to lose. You can lose even if you are 100% on game day. But I tell people, the real people who, not proud of their loss, but the real people who can take a loss really well is when they dedicate so much into the preparation. I think it's a really bad look when you half-ass something and you still win. You wouldn't appreciate it as much. And if you half-ass something and lose, you can't be angry because you half-assed it.
Yeah, I get that. Like, okay, there's so much I want to unpack there, actually. I want to come back to when you said you did the deep analysis. Now, I think I know what made you do this because I know you're very educated with all the books you read. But what made you do the deep analysis? So was it just something that a realization you came to? Was it something like, how did that come about?
Okay, so the reason why I did the deep analysis is because there's a saying, if you don't learn from the first mistake, it's the second one made. And in the Bible, it talks about we keep making mistakes until we learn from them. In the book of Proverbs, so I can't remember the exact quote. So the reason why is just also after my first loss, I'm not afraid to say this on camera, but after that first loss, it was the lowest I've ever felt. And I think that was the fear that I was running from, the fear of like, I walked into this and I lost, and that feeling of being down. Like no one wants to appreciate it. But it's also a good thing, that fear, because there was this amazing scientific study they did where they had rats pull on a rope. And what they could do on the first study was they had the smell of cheese on the other side of that rope. So the rats believed if they pulled on the rope hard enough that they would be able to get the cheese. And they pulled quite strongly. So the idea of achievement is very big. So the idea of achievement does drive us. And then they did another study with the rats where they had the rats pull on the rope, but behind them was the smell of a cat. So there was the idea that if I do not pull on this rope hard enough and escape, that cat's going to get me or whatever. That was the kind of mentality that I had. It did actually come from a point of desperation. It came from a point of fear. It's because I know what it's like to feel that lowest moment. You want to do everything in your power to make sure you do not go to that point again. So that was the main thing that drove me. Because yes, I want to win, but I never ever want to feel like that down again. I never want to feel like that feeling of just worthlessness and all that. And
that's interesting. That's interesting, mate, because I would say you almost need that first loss to get that feeling. Like, I don't think you get to that point of having that feeling unless you go through loss. You need to experience what that feeling's like, I think, to then get the motivation to not get it back. Because if you go through life never experiencing that feeling, I feel like you're probably not going to be as dedicated or motivated as someone who has gone through it and learnt what that feeling feels like to then push you towards the next thing. Would you agree on that? Do you think that was a valuable lesson? I think that's definitely a valuable
100%.
lesson. Yeah, that's a cool study too.
Yeah, I think it's people see fear as a bad thing. I think it's a good thing because it can drive us. It's the fear of going back to what you used to be is so much more stronger. And I feel like a lot of people go for a general. I feel like most people do generally go for it.
Yeah, but I think you definitely found a way to harness the loss to. I mean, obviously you then did the deep dive, you prepared better. And the cool thing about that is you're right. You win by for 6 weeks, you know that you can do something drastic for 6 weeks to prepare you for something which in the end paid off and you ended up winning, right? Like that must have felt amazing to know. Yes, it's cool to put in the preparation and know that that was great, even if you win or lose. But the fact that you won, I mean, did that unlock something in you? Like, has that motivated you more now to think, okay, what's the next thing I can do in BJJ or anything?
It is. It is because there's another, again, going back to another scientific study. It's so
Please.
easy to win once you start, right? So there's another study that talked about things like testosterone and the effect of winning and losing, right? All it takes in life is if you have one win, your testosterone goes through the roof and you feel like a winner. You're more likely to win after then. So that's why it's an upward spiral. But one thing they've also found is if you lose or if you perform badly, it affects your testosterone levels and makes losing more likely afterwards. So that's why now, I mean, it was nice to win and all that, and obviously I'm going through everything else, and it doesn't change the way it does. Again, it does obviously feel great, but personally, I believe it doesn't change my plan. I still aim to compete again in June, just after this whole move, and then the work is going okay. I'll have to build up, and there's a couple of other things that I'm working on at the moment. But the training is still consistent. And I do aim to have another matchup if I can in September. If my application goes through the promotion. But it's just really about keeping the momentum going. Really, because I believe what happens to a lot of people is once they win that one thing, they stop. Which is fair in some areas, but I think it's also they don't honor the win by keep going. I think the best example I can give is maybe this isn't the best example, but it's an example. Have you ever seen that movie Rush?
Rush.
Yeah.
Maybe. I've seen a lot of movies. It
Yeah.
will come to me if you start talking about it.
Yeah, so it's about James Hunt, who's played by Chris Hemsworth, and his rival Nicky Loud, who gets played
Yes.
by, I forget the name of the actor, but he was Baron Zemo in
Yes.
Captain
Yeah.
America.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Zemo. Yeah. Yeah. I know the
yeah,
guy. I can't
yeah,
remember his name, but I know the
yeah,
guy. Yeah. Zemo for sure. Yeah.
yeah. Great movie, and it's about the rivalry between the two of them, and it was about uh, the Formula One racing championships, and it was the year that James Hunt won the whole thing. And then they're having a conversation at the very end, and he was saying, "Oh, you're going to get back on the track and you're going to get back out there." And he goes, "No, mate, I did it. I won." And then that was all he did. And then he retired from racing 2 years later. But Nicky Loud kept going. He won multiple titles in the end. I think he was a multiple-time world championship. Now, what you've got is two different perspectives. There are the type of people who will go through life to achieve that one thing, and then they'll stop and they'll be happy they're achieving it, which, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that because James Hunt was one of the greatest Formula One race car drivers of all time. But I'm more of a Nicky Lauda type of person because there is something good to say about accepting what you have and being humble. But sometimes I feel like if you don't keep going, you could potentially fall short of your potential. And if you don't have that Nicky Loud attitude, then probably you wouldn't have been able to win multiple world championships. Again, I'm not a Formula One guy, but I just think that ending, the way they talk about winning, is a very, very different, like two totally different
Yeah.
perspectives on life.
That is
And I
actually, I
tend to
really,
steer more toward Nicky Loud. Yeah.
yeah, I resonate with
Sorry.
that. You're right. Like, no, you're right. I resonate with that, with what you're saying. Like, some people have it in them to just want to achieve the thing and then sail off into the sunset and do something else. But then there's the other mindset of people who want to do it forever or see how far they can go and actually make it part of I would say it's more making it part of your life. Like, because, you know, as I've gotten older, I tend to believe that the journey is the thing. The journey is what I'm in it for. I'm not in it to get to an end result. Like doing the podcast, for me, the journey is sitting down and talking with people every week. It's not like I need to get to 10 episodes or I need to get to 20 episodes and I'll be happy. For me, it's about I just want to keep doing it for as long as I can do it. And that's the mindset. That's like that Mickey Loud mindset. I think if I just want to keep going and see what I can actually do with it. And if I succeed, I succeed. If I don't, I don't. But the main thing is I'm just going to focus on doing the thing. I think that's two different types of people. I think I align with you in that sense. When you know what you want to do and where you want to go, it's actually easy to keep doing the thing, I would say, if you're passionate about it. And you seem clearly passionate about BJJ, but I know you have your hand, you do juggle a lot of different things that you're into. Where you're at the moment, like what would you say? Because you run your own business, you're a personal trainer running your own business, and when you said that you had to cut back on work, like I don't think people understand when you run your own business, you're cutting back on money coming in when you're cutting back on work.
Yeah.
So you gave up money to focus more on this other thing that wasn't a guarantee. That takes courage too, I think. I mean, that fits in with creating the courage. You must have had a lot of courage to cut back on income to focus on a competition, which must mean that you valued that competition or the participation in that competition quite highly, I'd imagine. Because not many people would give up money. Not many people give up money or will give up work to chase a dream as it is, mate. So the fact that you're willing to do that, I think, speaks highly of where your goals lie, or what type of person you are with what you want to do in life. So that must have been tough. That must have been tough. You know, giving up financial stability to do that. So I credit to you. Credit to you for that. That's awesome.
I just have a weird relationship with money. That's all. I mean, it's weird. Sometimes I enjoy the work more than I do the reward sometimes. But I don't, I just, it's a weird thing because it's always going to be there. You know what I mean? You never own money. You just have a sort of certain period of hold on it because eventually you're going to have to give it away or you're going to have to spend it. You never really actually own it. You earn it and then you hold on to it for a very small period of time. So I did cut back on a fair few things, but I was always telling myself it's always going to come back. You know, I don't really have much to say other than that.
Yeah.
I
Well,
just
look, if you become a
realized,
big jiu-jitsu star and you get bloody sponsorships, it'll come back then. Like that's where it'll come back then. If
yeah.
by chasing the dream, it could pay off. So I completely get it. Like, I think it's worth it. Everybody, I think, needs to make a point in life to. I mean, that's the whole point of this show, right? Is I'm trying to learn from people like yourself who are willing to make those sacrifices to actually get after a goal. Because as long as I've known you, you've always kind of been a person who what's the word, like you sail to your own, you've got your own compass. You don't follow the trend of what a lot of other people do or think you should do. You are always doing your own thing, whether it was listening to, I mean, this is a question I want to ask so people can hear it. How many books do you think you've read, or audiobooks? I count audiobooks the same as books. How many books do you reckon you've consumed? I'm curious.
Oh, gosh. I don't have the exact number, but right now I actually have to go through my room because I have a whole bunch that I have to donate to charity over the weekend because I don't have enough space for them when I move.
Yeah.
But I read definitely a lot. I am definitely at least a book every few weeks type of person, and I always listen to audiobooks. But I think it's just but I also feel like reading is, if we're going a little bit into the topic of reading and all that, books are generally the counterculture to technology because reading a book, you have to sit down, you have to get quiet, you have to turn off the noise, and you have to focus, and you have to skim through the lines. Whereas when it comes to things like phones, we open them up, it's effortless, we flick through, it's dopamine, it's the opposite. And you have to sit there and you have to focus, but with phones you don't have to focus. Personally, when it comes to reading, I mean, I can't imagine a day where I don't go about it, and I think it's the discipline of it, and it's also the feeling of it as well. When you, I mean, obviously, when you're on your phone for a long period of time, your brain actually starts to shrink and all that, and then things like brain rot, and we talk about like less firing. But when you actually do read, it's the opposite happens. It expands. You're able to think critically. You're able to respond more. You're able to. It's more beneficial, to say the least.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. You know what? The reason I asked that, because I really admired how many books you would read or audiobooks you would listen to, because I mean, I've been into audiobooks for the last couple of years, and since we started cleaning gyms, I started smashing out books even more. So like I got to a point where I think I did like 4 books in a month. I did like a book a week, just because I would listen to a book every night that I'd be working. So I started really getting into it. And then I started realizing, once I started focusing on books and topics, I started to feel like I had, like me and Lani, we would have more things to talk about. We talked about different things rather than just talking about whatever TV show it was. We're talking about topics. We got into politics. Like I feel like once I started embracing books and other people's, what they produce in books. I'm not talking like fiction. I'm talking like, books about business, books about sales, books about self-development, all those types of things is kind of what I'm more into. Like I'm just listening to, funnily enough, I've got like half an hour left of Justin Baldoni's Man Enough book. I thought I'd give it a listen. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's like, he's in the news a lot right now because of him, and he's a film director as well. And he's gone through a thing with Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively.
Oh
So
yeah, I remember
yeah. So when I
that.
heard that, yeah. So when I heard this,
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? I'm a fan of Ryan Reynolds, and what I'm hearing doesn't sound too good about him, which is quite disappointing. But I
No.
thought, you know what? I'm going to go and listen to this other guy's book and just see what he's about. And there's a few things in the book that I don't like, that I don't agree with his point of view on things. But there's also a lot of things that I do like and do agree on. And one thing that's teaching me by listening to books, I find I don't know how you feel about this, but I find I can take a book better when I'm listening to it, because I can be doing a task like cleaning, but I'm thinking and I'm absorbing like what the person's saying and listening to it from their own voice or whatever. And I'm finding that I'm really enjoying listening to people that I don't necessarily agree with on a lot of topics, but then finding things that I do agree with them on, and realizing when it comes to like politics, for let's say, you can't get caught up in echo chambers of listening to one side's story. You got to listen to both sides' story and make up your own mind. And I think that's a thing that listening to books has taught me. Or reading books or learning from people that I agree with, and then also learning from people I don't agree with. Is that something you do when you are reading a book? Do you sometimes go and look at a topic or a person that you're unsure about, or is it more like,
Well, it does, but generally nowadays I'm going down the lines of reading just more and more fictional stuff. Because I've
okay,
read so many self-help books, and I can't tell you the number of times, like, I've heard the same thing over and over again.
mm,
See, the thing is now with where I'm just at is I read mainly now for pleasure. I'm
yep,
reading almost purely fiction, or the only thing that I'm reading that's non-fiction is something based on psychology. So I'm actually
okay,
am learning, or an autobiography. Like currently, right now, I'm reading the autobiography or biography. I am currently reading the Robert Oppenheimer biography, the
ooh,
one that the movie itself was based off, and
nice,
it's more than like 500 pages long. But the reason why I like it is because whoever wrote it had a very deep understanding of physics as well. So it's explaining how they made the atomic bomb, why Robert Oppenheimer was so intellectually, it was captivating, how they
mm,
made it, everything that came as a result after making it, and it was those types of things that I have to ask now. Okay, is this benefiting me, or and then again, am I reading for pleasure? And
mm,
going down the idea of self-help books, I tell people this. This is how I also generally feel about, when it comes to things like self-help. You can, uh, still be waking up at 4 a.m. every day. You could be working out every day, and you could be eating healthy every day, and you could be doing all these things. But you can still be a loser. In order for you to actually truly change your life, you have to do the things that you know that are going to move the needle, and stop doing the things that you know are driving you back. And what I mean by that is, you don't quit smoking by reading about smoking. You have to quit smoking by doing the thing itself. You can't get better at jiu-jitsu by reading jiu-jitsu books and watching instructionals all the time long. I have to do the thing that makes me better. So that's why I steer away from self-help books, because, I mean, they are a small little boost, but again, you have to carry it on. And you know, that's why I'm at right now in terms of reading. So in terms of reading as well, it just comes down to more fictional stuff, so I can really enjoy it. I just what's some things I've just been reading a lot of lately. I've been reading a lot of Jack Carr, who wrote The Terminal
Oh
List.
yeah.
Brilliant.
Yep.
Yeah, he's brilliant. I highly recommend
Yeah.
Jack Carr. I've been reading a lot of my favorite author, Michael Robotham, which is it's one of the best crime thrillers ever written. It's about this clinical psychologist who is named by Joe O'Loughlin, and he has Parkinson's disease, and he obviously knows his time's coming up. But what he does is he spends his years trying to help the police solve cases, because he has such a deep knowledge of human beings and human behavior. So he sort of helps the police profile this person. It's really, really interesting stuff, because as the series progresses, you start to see him lose his humanity a lot more, because he has to think like a serial killer, or he has to think like the worst people. It kind of changes him, which I thought was really good.
That's cool.
What else is something? Yeah. So nowadays, I'm usually just reading for pleasure.
Nice. But see, I only ask that because the more I get into books, the more I'm enjoying it. Like I listened to a biography before. Like I'm about to listen to one of Russell Brand's books. Actually, I just got recently, dealing with recovery and things like that. So I'm like interested in learning about that. Yeah. So it's only like 5 hours. I'm like, oh wow, I could bang this out in a week. I could bang a book out in a week, easy. Like Monday to Friday, I could do that within the hours of work. No problem whatsoever. So I'm like really enjoying just getting into learning, and the more I do it, the more I think like, where was this when I was younger? I wish I had that. And I admire you, because at such a young age you seem to be reading. Like I remember you'd be reading at the desk in the gym with music blaring, and you'd just be sitting there reading, focusing, off in your own world, learning. And I just wanted to let you know that I actually really admired that. And I thought about that when I got into books more, thinking about like, oh wow, like now I understand it, because like I'm really getting into learning just more, whether it be stories or biographies or books on science or sales. I did a lot of sales books, and they were quite helpful, just sales techniques and things like that I used in life. Now you mentioned, what did you mention? I don't tell me, I'm going to lose my thought. You mentioned, what was it? About your discipline. So would you say that you read every day? Is that part of your discipline as well? Like you'll just make time for that with your training, with your reading? You know, what else is part of your discipline on a daily basis when it comes to
Okay,
just living
so when
life
it
with Joe?
comes to discipline, there's three non-negotiables I always have. So four non-negotiables. I have to pray at least once a day, and it's
Yep.
generally the first thing you can do, very first thing in the morning. Like, obviously, you've got another day of being alive. Second one is, of course, you have to do something for your head, which is obviously getting a little bit smarter, obviously, which is reading. So what I do is I read multiple books. I keep multiple books in places where I know they're going to have easy access to. There's always one in my room, one at my desk at work, and one in my car. So they're three totally different topics. So one's a fiction, one's a non-fiction, and one's just something random that, I have to, focus to read. And then the third one is moving or doing something for your body every day. And then by doing that, to doing something body every day. So that's something like exercising or jiu-jitsu or doing weights or running or anything like that. And then the last one is doing something for your soul. That's generally the one that most people don't understand. The soul can come down to things like creativity or mindfulness. So if that's something like journaling, or it could be something like meditation, or it could be something like creating like a work of art. Some people are interested, obviously, or writing out something. That could be something for them. But if you do those 4 things every day, you pretty much there's a lot of you can make a lot of progress in the space of a very short period of time.
Yeah,
But
I
they're the
love
4
that.
best things for yourself, because on a daily basis, obviously, we're in different positions in life. But if you do those 4 things for yourself, then you're pretty much putting yourself first. That's the best way I can put it, really.
Yeah. That's really good, mate. I'm going to take heed on that because I definitely don't do all of those every day. I feel like I'm hitting the creativity thing. I'll hit that because I'm doing my photography. I'm learning how to use my new camera. You saw me yesterday at the gym shooting with Kev. Like, I'm practicing how to do something that I'm interested in. So that gets the creative juices flowing. I'm listening to the books, but I'm not praying and I'm not always uh, doing physical exercise, but I've dropped off on that quite a bit. But I have been getting back into it and getting my diet right. And I don't say diet anymore, getting my nutrition right. Just learning to make healthier lifestyle eating choices, I think, is a big one too, because you got to put the care into the body if you want the body to perform. So I feel like I'm getting those, and that's really helpful. I really appreciate that. I just remembered what I wanted to ask you. So when you said about the learning, I'm someone who learns better by doing as well. Like learning to, if I'm learning to use the camera, I would rather, like, I pay a gentleman, Rodrigo, who I've interviewed on the podcast, to come and help teach me how to use the camera, because I could watch a video on learning how to use the camera, but then going to use the camera after watching the video, it's like I'm forgetting things. But if I'm there with someone and they're showing me and saying, do this, do that, I tend to retain it a lot better. I don't know why, but I just do. So that's what I had to just call back to that when you said about actually doing the thing. I think that makes sense. A lot of people don't put themselves out there to go and do the thing. They do read a lot of self-help books and talk about doing it, but they don't actually follow through. So I think that's a good point that you made there. Now, you mentioned praying. If we can, I'd like to talk to you about this because I didn't know this about you when we worked together. And I actually find it quite interesting, and I'm intrigued to talk to you about it because it's a journey that I've been going on and what I've been learning a little bit more about lately. I'm still not sure where I'm at with any of it, but I'm open to it, and just taking
Mm-hmm.
more in the older I get. So, where did this journey of religion begin with you? Has it always been something that you've been into, or is it something that's become stronger the last couple of years? I'm interested to know.
So it came back when we were in UFC gym. It was a bit of an interesting story, but it wasn't like a singular moment that really happened. Like, it wasn't like a down moment where I was on my knees. But for a little bit of backstory, I grew up going to Catholic schools my entire life. I went through all the rites of initiation, and I never really saw much for it. But it kind of came down the line when I was reading, obviously when I was reading books and getting, trying to absorb the information. A lot of philosophy stems back to religion.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I was reading certain things, they would always be doing Bible quotes. Or when I was reading, like, Jordan Peterson, he likes to talk heavily about, because obviously Jordan Peterson's one of my heroes, he talks heavily about the Old Testament, and I was reading it constantly. And then I remember one day I was reading a Jordan Peterson book, and it was talking about the story of Cain and Abel. And then one of my colleagues, obviously remember Lockie, he
Mm-hmm.
gave me his Bible. And then I was like, hey man, I just want to start reading this Bible because I just feel like it's a means to an education. That's really where it was. I was more curious.
Mm.
And then when I actually started reading the Bible and then reading certain chapters, slowly things started to make sense, and I started really, because reading the Bible is not easy. It's not like
Mm.
reading a typical book. It's hard because you have to sit there and you have to force yourself to read something, and then you have to think about it, digest it, and then you have to apply it. That's why so many people, I don't believe, don't really want to bother, because it's a very difficult thing to do. And then at the time, I was obviously with my ex, and I remember she was away a lot because she worked FIFO and 2-in-1 swing. So I spent a lot of time alone. So I would read it at night. And then that's when I started praying, because it came to a chapter about asking God for what you want in life, and asking, you're not being afraid to ask for these things, but you have to be willing to do the work, and you have to be willing to pray for it. So, and that's what praying's about. It's a conversation between you and God. And strictly, I've always believed, I'm not one of those, I am Catholic, but I'm not someone who goes around pointing his finger at telling people what to do. My relation, it's a direct relationship from me and him, with him, that me, between me and God. That's it. That's all that it is. So when I tell people I'm praying, I'm just talking to him. That's it. And then slowly, as the years, slowly as time went by, and I remember spending a lot of time on my own. I started reading a lot, and I started praying a lot. And then I didn't actually start going to church again until when I was actually getting ready for this fight. So it's something you have to build over a gradual period of time. And then the longer you go and the more you stay invested in it, the better it gets. So this is where it is right now. What people say is, it took me 2 years to get to this part. And then, again, the reason why it comes back to my philosophy, we're going to try to go all the way. When it comes to faith, you'll have people, and again, not criticizing them, you'll have people who just sort of dip their toes in it. With me, when it comes to faith, I'm the type of person who wants to dive in. So it's me just trying to see how far can I take this, this relationship with God and all that. How much can I pray? How much can I do the things that it says? How much can I read about it? How much can I learn about it? That is the whole concept of the process. That is the whole process with me and my faith alone. And the best thing about it as well, I know it can be kind of strange, because it talks about when you go into this, you can become a little bit persecuted, which is okay. Because ever since I started posting about my faith and all that on my social media, people can take it in a very negative way, and they can be like super judgy, and they can be like, oh, you're one of them now, but it kind of reveals people's intentions towards you, which is a good thing you have to be mindful of, because it talks about that in the Bible. When you go down this path, you're separating yourself from this world. There's a very famous quote that I love to put up on my wall every day. If you live for this world, if you have love for this world, then the love of the Father is not within you. Lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. And eventually the lust of this world dies and goes away. But those who do the will of God, so abide the will of God, will live forever. So the reason why this quote is just talking about detachment, and it's not getting too caught up in this world, not being too attached to everything in this world, because eventually it's going to pass away. It's going to die eventually. But your faith should always be something that will grow, and if you do God's will, then eventually you will live a bit. Then that's another conversation for itself. But that's basically what it comes to, spending eternity with him in heaven.
Yeah. Look, I'm finding it very interesting, because I'll be honest with you. I was atheist for a long time. I even read The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins.
It's a good book. I've read that too.
It is a good book. That was one I actually read. I didn't listen to that. I actually read that book. This was back when I was working in the casino. This is before I worked in the gym industry, actually. So this was kind of like 13 years ago. God, I feel old now. And I actually read that book, and I was really into Richard Dawkins stuff, and I was reading a lot of his material. But as the years have gone on, and see, I've got Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules of Life. 12, I think it's 12 rules. I haven't finished it, but I actually started it a few years ago, and then I stopped. I'm like, once I finish the Russell Brand one, and I've got another one by Patrick David I'm going to do next called Choose Your Enemies Wisely. It's more a business book, learning how to.
Read that one.
PBD is awesome. I
Brilliant.
just finished
Brilliant
his. Yeah, I just finished his first book, which was what was that one? I can't remember it. It'll come to me after the podcast, I'm sure. But I just finished PBD's first book, and I thought I got to listen to Choose Your Enemies Wisely because I listened to his podcast and I quite like what he's about. But the more I read and the more I learn, and the older I get, I'm 42 now, and people who listen to this podcast probably sick of hearing me say it. And then since becoming a father, the more I'm open to maybe I don't know everything and I need to look at both sides and look at I've followed the side of not believing for so long. Now I'm more open to looking to the side that is more spiritual and thinking about God and religion and all those types of things. So I'm on a journey of just learning, and I'll probably go back and finish that Jordan Peterson book just to see where that leads me. My sister's quite religious and my mother's quite religious. My auntie's quite religious. And I don't know if I ever just rebelled against them because of that. I don't know. So if you're listening, fam, shout out. But it's definitely something I'm on. So when I saw you talking about it, it just intrigued me. And I'm like, I want to know how you've come about getting to this point. Because I'm kind of on the journey of like, I don't know if I believe, I don't know where I'm at, but I admire people who do. Like PBD, like Jordan Peterson, I like a lot of their philosophies, and so I've been more open to learning about it because if people I respect talking about these things, I'm like, maybe there's something to it, and I should actually just give it the time to learn and then make up my mind. So I'm really impressed that you're talking about it, because you're right. People can persecute you or look funny upon you, and maybe I was one of those people back in the day, but I'm definitely not that way now. So thanks for sharing that. And so what's your journey with that now? Just keep going all in, keep learning. I'm assuming you've already finished the Bible. Is it something that you reread or you reread chapters?
I tell people I don't read it in its entirety. I do read because it's a lot. Obviously, it's massive, but I do my best to read it constantly. But it's something you also have to constantly go back and refer to really truly understand it. The best way I always tell people is like Jordan Peterson's book. It's a guide. That's what I tell people. It's not something you have to follow down to the T, because obviously it was written so long ago, but a lot of the stuff is still relevant to today. A lot of the things I tell people, a lot of the things that you suffer on a daily basis, it has the answers to. A lot of people are anxious, and then I tell people in the Bible it talks about casting your anxieties onto God. A lot of people are talking about in my age, in the world of dating, which is dumpster fire these days, obviously. I'm single, by the way, and I choose to say single, but it talks about what type of person you should be that attracts the type of person you want. So a lot of I tell people, once you start reading the Bible, it has a lot of answers to a lot of the questions we still think of on a daily basis.
Yeah, so I completely get that.
Yeah, and if there's one more thing I could recommend as well, because you're reading Jordan Peterson, he did write a new book last year called We Who Wrestle with God.
I've seen that. I haven't got it yet.
Yeah, it is absolutely fantastic. I highly recommend if you get a chance to listen to it on Audible, or if you get a chance to really read it. And you really have to take your time with it, because he's deeply dissecting all the stories of the Old Testament, and he sort of breaks them down in a way on how it's relevant to today. So he's using psychology and he's using religion as a way of creating like a logical answer to why we are the way that we are.
Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good. I need to finish that. I want to do 12 rules first, and then I think that'll prime me up to get onto that. It's funny because Russell Brand, the book I'm about to listen to, he's on that journey too. He's become full on Christian. I think he's become. He has, right? And I quite like. He's very intellectual, and I quite like listening to him talk. So I'm like, that'd be an interesting book to listen to. So I've got a lot of books to bang out, which I'm excited about. It's funny. I'm excited to smash books. And I just put it out there to anybody else. If you find you're scrolling on your phone, check how long you're scrolling on your phone for, and then think about going and listening to an audiobook, maybe go do a workout while you're listening to an audiobook. You're killing two birds with one stone. You're learning and you're helping your physical fitness. I think that'd be one thing that people can do to really change their ways, especially if they're wanting to change, that is, I guess. Now, I'm mindful of your time, brother, because I know you're in the middle of work and you're making the time for me. So what I always ask people to close off the podcast, what one piece of advice would you give to people now, because you're getting after your goals and you're chasing your dreams and you understand discipline and what it takes? You've proven it to yourself that you know what it takes to go out there and get after something. What advice would you give to people who are thinking about or wanting to chase their dreams or get after it but aren't sure where to start or what to do? What would you tell someone like that?
The same thing I always tell myself, and my favorite quote for life, and that is, if you're going to try, go all the way. You may not have the answers, you may not have everything you need, but you have to see it all the way through. The people who actually made it in life, they did not care about the noise, they did not care about what was in front of them. They just knew that they knew exactly where they wanted to go, and they just went all the way. That's it.
I think that's great advice, mate.
Don't try, but if you're going to try, go all the way.
That's great advice, brother. I think you're an example of that. You're doing it now. You're on the mission. You're on your way. I'm excited to see where you go with it. And I would actually love to talk to you again more when we have a bit more time. We can talk a bit longer about some things. I think that'd be awesome, because I think you've got a wealth of wisdom to share from, in your young life that you've learned already, mate. So I'm proud of you. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep crushing it.
Awesome, man.
Because I think
awesome,
you're
man.
killing it.
Awesome. We got to make a promise, though. If we're going to do this again, we got to do it in person. Trust me, man. I know where the studio is. I got all the stuff we need to do. Trust me. It's just awesome. I love podcasting, but not that. But in my experience at the time, when it came to doing constant Zoom calls, oh man, it was a nightmare. We got to do. I promise you. I'll help you sort it out. We'll do it in person. Yeah,
we'll do it in person. I like that. That's the goal one day, to get it to a studio where I can be in person, especially with people in Perth where we are. We can actually do that. So I'll hold me to it. We'll do it again. We'll catch up again and we'll go over it and we'll do it in person, whatever it takes.
Awesome. All right, brother. I appreciate that. Thank you, man.
No worries. Everybody, make sure you hop in the description and give Joe a follow on Instagram. You get some good tips for health and fitness. If you're in the Balcatta area or anywhere in Perth and you're looking for training or tips, hit him up. You do people online as well, right? You help people out online still. Yep. You do all that. So yeah, hit him up. He can give you great advice for health and fitness, even just to follow his journey about chasing his dreams. It's inspiring. So I put that out there to everybody. Joe, again, mate, I'll end it there. Let me just get this ready. Thank you so much for coming on, brother, and being the 9th guest, both our favorite number on Create the Courage podcast. You're an absolute legend.